Ahead and start the recording. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Vanderhorst. I am the Employment Law Unit Head and a staff attorney here at South Carolina Legal Services. Thank you for joining us for our first installment of our Barriers to Employment presentations for Second Chances Month, which is the entire month of April. We're starting off our campaign, I guess, with our presentation, our live presentation on expungements. This is, of course, just for informational purposes. If you have some questions, my colleague Cheryl Wright will be moderating, and she can stop me in the middle, or we can take questions at the end as well. So don't hesitate to either raise your hand or just go ahead and type in the chat. So with that, South Carolina Legal Services is a statewide nonprofit law firm. We provide free legal services to low-income individuals and families across the state of South Carolina. We have 9 offices strategically placed to cover all of the individual counties in South Carolina. I am personally located in the Charleston office, and our office is one of the bigger offices, and we cover the most counties, those being Charleston, Dorchester, Berkeley, Colleton, Beaufort, Hampton, and Jasper counties. So we provide, legal representation, civil legal representation, which means pretty much anything that's not criminal, in the following areas. So consumer issues, education, employment, estates and probate, family law, housing, public benefits, community, we do some work with community economic development, and we can provide anything from counsel and advice to maybe a brief service like helping you write a letter or fill out a form, to full representation in a court of law, depending on what your particular needs are. So if you would like or need to apply for our services, you can do so online at www.lawhelp.org/SC/online intake, or you can simply call our statewide intake office at 888-346-5592. We have representatives available Monday through Thursday from 9 to 6 to take applications for individuals in need. Of course, if you've been served with court documents like a complaint, or you have another deadline such as you've been denied unemployment benefits and you have 10 days to appeal, those would be considered emergencies, and you can call your local office to do an intake directly with that office. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about expungements, and expungements are a way to remove items from your criminal record. So what is a criminal record? Your criminal record is data kept by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. It includes arrests, dismissed charges, charges that were not prosecuted, not guilty verdicts, as well as convictions. It also can include records kept at courthouses. It can include records gathered by commercial databases that employers like to use prior to extending an offer of employment. Of course, your criminal record is also comprised of any maybe federal convictions that you may have, which would not show up on your South Carolina criminal record check. It would also include any convictions or arrests that you had in other states. Of course, that would also not show up on a SLED check here in South Carolina. So what are the effects of having a criminal record? As I'm sure we all know, employers routinely run criminal record checks prior to extending an offer of employment, which means that if there is something on those on your SLED report or on another state's criminal record report, it can prevent you from getting a job or moving up in a job or in an agency that you already have a job in. It can also be an obstacle to professional licensing, like becoming a certified nursing aide or a barber or a lawyer or any of those things. Also, it can prevent you from obtaining housing. Lots and lots of landlords run criminal record checks when you submit an application for a lease, and they can deny to rent to you based on that criminal record. So how can you see what's on your criminal record? So for South Carolina, you want to obtain a copy of your SLED report. You can do that online through their website, which is www.sled.sc.gov. It's $25. You can pay by credit card or debit card, and it's available immediately. You can also apply by mail, by mailing them a check for $25, and then they will return it to you via mail. You can also do it at a local law enforcement office, which would also include any out-of-state results based on a fingerprint search. So, what is an expungement? An expungement is the destruction of criminal records related to an arrest or criminal conviction. All the records of that charge or conviction are destroyed, and they should no longer appear on your SLED report. Now, only certain charges can be expunged. There's several categories, and each category can only be used once. So once you get your expungement under, your general misdemeanor, if you have another misdemeanor, that is not eligible for expungement because you've already used it. I'm just going to go through all the categories one by one, and then give you some information about how to access those expungements or how to apply for the expungement afterwards. So the first category, which is the most broad and the best category because it's free, are non-convictions. So non-convictions are arrests that didn't result in a conviction. Those include anything that was dismissed by the judge, anything that the prosecutor decided not to prosecute. Those are called null pros charges. And it also includes not guilty verdicts. So for non-convictions, you request those through the court that processed the charge. For misdemeanors and lower end violations of our criminal code, those usually are processed through either a magistrate, municipal court, or summary court. And that's where you request your expungement for those charges. Usually they have their own application. It's usually available online, and the cost is free. Now, if it was processed through what's called general sessions court, meaning that it was handled by the solicitor's office, and it went through your county's state criminal court, that's general sessions, then you have to request that expungement for those null pros, dismissed, or not guilty verdicts through the solicitor's office in that county. The next area would be through diversion programs. So these are charges that are brought against an individual, but instead of going through the process of prosecuting the individual accused of the crime and getting a conviction, either the solicitor will offer or the judge will order what's called an intervention or diversion program. So those include pretrial intervention program, PTI, alcohol education programs, traffic education programs, veterans court, which we have here in the Charleston area, mental health court, which we also have here in our area, or and drug court. The fees for these expungements tend to be less because there's no fee to South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. So there's only the $250 fee to the solicitor's office, as well as the $35 fee to the clerk of court. Now you have to complete all of the requirements under those programs, and the solicitor has to verify that they've been completed prior to applying for the expungement. Okay, so fraudulent check. So you see this if, you know, wrote a check, maybe you had something clear that you forgot about before it was deposited, and you were short of funds in your bank account and it was returned to the merchant that you wrote the check to. So what that meant, that merchant will do is go through the bad check program through the solicitor's office and basically prosecute you for writing what they call a fraudulent check. So each fraudulent check is a separate offense. You can only have one expungement of a fraudulent check. You cannot have any convictions within a year after the conviction for that fraudulent check. I will say that if there were several checks, fraudulent check warrants served at the same time, sometimes the court will consider that as one expungement, so you can get all of those that were processed at the same time expunged under that fraudulent check category of expungement. The fees to that are the most expensive, being $310, and that includes a $250 fee to the solicitor's office, a $35 fee to the clerk of court, and then a $25 fee to SLED. Okay, so simple possession. So this is a conviction of a first offense misdemeanor for drug possession or unlawful possession of a prescription drug. In order to have that expunged, there needs to be 3 years between the completion of the sentence, including any probation and parole that you received in sentencing, and any other conviction on your record. That also includes any convictions in any other state. So if you had a simple possession conviction here in South Carolina but didn't have any other convictions, but then had a conviction 2 years later in North Carolina, you would not be eligible for this expungement because you still had that conviction in another state.
Stephanie?
Yes, ma'am.
We have a question. Someone asked, what about domestic violence?
I haven't gotten there yet. It's further down in the presentation. Once I cover it, if you still have questions, I'll come back. So this also applies to anyone who received a conditional discharge for simple possession, which sometimes is sentenced instead of either suspended sentence, probation, or anything else the court may consider. Okay, so first offense drug conviction for possession with intent to distribute of a controlled substance is expungible if 20 years have passed since the completion of the sentencing, including probation and parole, and there's no other drug conviction or felony conviction in any state within that 20-year period. This is your general cost, your $310, with your $250 fee to the solicitor, $35 to the clerk of court, and $25 to SLED. Okay, so here we go. General misdemeanors. This is where domestic violence, this is your opportunity to have a domestic violence charge or conviction disposed of. So under this statute, any conviction of a crime that carries a maximum penalty of not more than 30 days in jail or a fine of not more than $1,000 is expungible if 3 years have passed since the conviction and there are no other convictions in any state within that 3-year period. Now, there's a caveat. If the conviction was for criminal domestic violence or domestic violence in the third degree. It was called criminal domestic violence prior to a change in the law several years ago. Now it's called DV. The waiting period for that is 5 years. So you have to wait 5 years from that conviction in order for it to be expungible. You can't have any pending criminal charges at the time that you apply for the expungement. You can only get one charge expunged under the general misdemeanor statute. And the fees are the same as previous. So $250 to the solicitor's office, $35 to the clerk of court, and $25 to SLED. So yes, a domestic violence charge is expungible. The waiting period is longer. It's 5 years instead of 3 years. But it is expungible. Okay, so this is an interesting category because the first offense youthful offender allows for the expungement of felony convictions, which can be really, really helpful to individuals. So under the Youthful Offender Act, if it's your first offense conviction under the Youthful Offender Act, which means between the ages of 17 to 24, and your sentence under the Youthful Offender Act, you can have those convictions expunged as long as you have no other convictions within 5 years after completing your sentence, which includes any probation and parole. Now, this applies to individuals who were convicted prior to June 2nd, 2010, but whose convictions are not listed under the Youthful Offender Act. So prior to 2010, so now if you look at a SLED report, if there's a conviction under the Youthful Offender Act, let's say in 2020, it's going to say sentencing YOA, which means Youthful Offender Act, and it'll tell you what the sentencing is, okay? Prior to 2010, they didn't do that. So if you were between the ages of 17 and 24 when you were convicted of the crime, and it fits otherwise within the parameters of those Youthful Offender Act expungements, then you can still have it expunged even though you weren't prosecuted under the Youthful Offender Act.
We have a question, Stephanie.
I'm ready.
It says, what if your conviction for felony controlled substance was in the state of Virginia?
So my presentation today only applies to convictions in South Carolina. Cheryl and I are lawyers licensed to practice here in South Carolina. We are not, Cheryl, you're not licensed to practice in Virginia, are you?
No, ma'am.
So we are not licensed to practice in the state of Virginia, and we are also not able to give advice regarding convictions in Virginia. However, what you would do is maybe reach out to legal services in Virginia or an attorney in Virginia to see what exactly their expungement laws are, and if they have, if your conviction is eligible for expungement. Okay, next category, failure to stop for blue light. So it's a conviction of a misdemeanor, first offense, failure to stop for motor vehicle for failure to stop your motor vehicle for a blue light. You can have no additional convictions for 3 years after completion of the sentence. And then of course the fees are associated with those are your $250 fee to the solicitor, your $35 fee to the clerk of court, and then $25 to SLED. So this is another category. So failure to stop for blue lights is in and of itself a misdemeanor, but it's a completely separate category. So you get like an extra expungement under here. Okay, so juvenile offenses. So the court has discretion whether or not to expunge these juvenile offenses. You must have no prior conviction of an offense that would carry a maximum term of imprisonment of 5 years or more if committed by an adult. You have to be at least 18 years of age, completed the sentence, and have no later charges. this does not include expunging convictions for violent crimes. And of course, the fees are the same. So $250 to the solicitor, $35 to the clerk of court, and then $25 to SLED. Okay, so the last category that we have here is for survivors of human trafficking. If you are a victim of human trafficking and you have convictions that are a result of your trafficking, then those are expungible under the law. They have to be a direct result of being a victim of human trafficking, though. So legal services does assist survivors of human trafficking. I know my one of my colleagues had the opportunity to assist a survivor this afternoon. So types of charges that are usually included with this under this statute would be, prostitution charges and anything else you were required to do. You just have to connect the dots between the trafficking and the offense in order to get the expungement. So one more thing. So any expungements under this particular law are free. So there's no cost to survivors of human trafficking to clean up their record of convictions that are related to their trafficking. So how do I get an expungement? So it depends on the charge, and it depends on where the charge was processed. So for non-convictions in magistrate or municipal court, you need to request the expungement for that non-conviction directly from that court. Now, some courts have their applications online. Some courts have their own process. The best thing to do is to contact that particular magistrate or municipal court and just ask them how to go about requesting an expungement for those non-convictions. They're very helpful and willing to assist. So any other cases, including convictions in magistrate, municipal, and summary courts, are processed by the solicitor's office in the county where the charge occurred. So, for instance, if you had a shoplifting charge and you were convicted in municipal court in North Charleston, you still would apply to have that expunged through the solicitor's office in Charleston County, because North Charleston's in Charleston County. That's the circuit that would handle that. Most applications are online in those solicitors' offices. So if you can Google Charleston County Solicitor, it'll take you straight to their page. Under Charleston counties, they have an outreach tab. You click on that and then you see expungement. And they have actually some great information on there about expungements. They have their own presentation that you can look through. They have the application, the directions on there. And then they also, Charleston County, you can track the progress of your expungement through the process. So once you apply, it takes several months for them to process the expungement, because it has to go through the clerk of court, it has to go to SLED, it has to go back to the solicitor. So basically what they've done is they assign it a number, and you can type in the number and you can see what stage of the process you're in. So whether it's with the clerk of court or whether it's, we're waiting on SLED to get back to us, those kinds of things. So in order to apply for an expungement, most courts require a disposition sheet. In fact, I haven't come across a court that doesn't require a disposition sheet. So I would advise that you just go ahead and get that prior to submitting your application, just because it makes it easier for you and it makes it easier for the court. So a disposition sheet is basically the sheet that the court issues once it has moved all the way through its process, and you've gone to a hearing and the judge has issued a ruling. So it'll give the warrant number, it'll give, the code section that you were charged under, and then it'll give how it was disposed of which is why it's called a disposition sheet. So it'll say either non-conviction, dismissed, or it'll say null pros, or it'll say guilty, bench trial, and it'll give the sentencing along with it. So your application, when you fill out that application, you'll attach that disposition sheet to it as proof that it's actually expungible based on that. They'll also probably require you to provide a copy of your SLED report. And then of course, you have to prove your identity. So your social security card and your photo and a photo ID. Not all the time, sometimes it depends on the court. So fees, I went through them individually, but I'm just gonna go back through. So generally, the fees are $310 for the majority of convictions. And that of course includes your $25 to SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. It includes a $35 fee to the clerk of court, and then a $250 fee to the solicitor's office. Now, those fees must be paid in 3 separate money orders. They do not accept personal checks, and they do not accept cash. I will say that some solicitors have money available to assist with those fees. However, that money is of course first come, first serve, and it depends on the solicitor's office and how much money they've received and if they've already given it out to other eligible applicants. But the way that you find that out is you just give them a call. You call that individual solicitor's office and see if they have funds available. Now, as I said before, non-convictions, so anything that you were found not guilty of, anything that was null prost or dismissed is free unless it was part of a plea bargain. So if you had several charges at one time, let's say you were picked up for failure to stop for blue lights, PWID, and possession. And the solicitor, as part of your plea bargain, they went forward and you made a deal that you would plead to the possession charge, but they would null pros the PWID and the failure to stop for blue lights. Because those 2 other charges were considered in that plea bargain, you'll have to pay the fees for that as if it was a conviction to get it off your record. Now, diversion programs, as I said before, they do not include the fee to SLED, so they are only $285 to have expunged. And of course, you have to complete all the requirements under those programs prior to applying for the expungement. So, what if your convictions do not qualify for expungement? So, like I said, these are just the categories that we have in South Carolina for expungement. You can only use each category one time. So if you have several misdemeanor convictions, then you can only have one expunged, the one that qualifies, and the rest are going to remain on your criminal record. But that's okay, because not all hope is lost, because once you have finished through the expungement process, you can apply for a pardon. And that's a whole other application process. And usually I would tell you about it. However, I'm going to ask you to join us on April 21st, 2021 for our live presentation on pardons, which my colleague, Tiffany Love, who is our Barriers to Employment lead attorney out of the Columbia office, is hosting. And she'll be talking all about pardons and what you need to know and what they are and how to get them and how to apply and how we can help. So if you need assistance or you have some questions about your criminal record or about your eligibility for an expungement, you can, again, contact us through our statewide intake line at 888-346-5592, or you can complete an application online at sclegal.org. Okay, so that's my quick overview of expungements here in South Carolina. Like I said, if you have charges in other states, each state has its own expungement laws. I will say that we have some of the best expungement laws in the nation based on my conversations with other attorneys in other states, other legal aid organizations. It's one thing that we do pretty well. But like I said, I would encourage you to contact legal aid in another state, or we can also do referrals here from SC Legal as well. Now, does anybody else have any more questions?
There was a question that says, is it possible to get this PowerPoint for reference?
So I will be, I've recorded this presentation today, and it will be posted to our YouTube page. So yes, it will be available.
I don't have any other outstanding questions. There was another question about where they should go, but I believe you answered that in your the last few slides. So I don't have any other questions in the chat or the Q&A.
Okay, guys. So if you don't have any more questions, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, this is our first presentation this month. Every Wednesday this month, Second Chances Month, the Employment Law Unit here at South Carolina Legal Services will be presenting live on barriers to employment and how we can assist you and what you can do if you are encountering some obstacles. So today we started out with expungements. Next week we will be talking about driver's license reinstatement, and then the following week Tiffany is talking about pardons, and then we're gonna close it up on the 28th of April with a Facebook Live with Tiffany and I just answering questions from the Facebook community. So look us up and follow us on Facebook if you're interested. And of course, follow us on YouTube. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. And I really thank you for joining us today.